Alright, we're at book 8 of the Shield Hero now, which for the show is season 2, episodes 7, 8, 9, and 10. And they did a lot better job with this book than the previous two, since they gave it 4 episodes. They made a couple major changes along the way, but I actually don't know how much they impact the story in the long term, so I'm not sure if it's really going to hurt it or not, the way that I think skipping the other books did, where they skipped a lot of character stuff. Alright, so let's get into it. Alright, before I get into it, I guess I'm supposed to ask people to like and subscribe and shit. So if you're here watching this, just go fucking do it. Thanks. Let's get into it. So for episode 7, the show did a pretty good job of sticking to the book. A couple minor changes. But I was glad that it went pretty fast through this, because in the book, this part kind of drags, where they wake up in the prison cell and they're in the labyrinth and all that. And one of these changes I don't really understand, but I'm not sure if it hurts the show, is in the book, it's Naofumi and Rishia in prison. And in the show, they have Raphtalia there too. In the books, she got teleported somewhere else and he just doesn't know what happened to her, which is kind of stressful for him, which I thought was good. But they kind of compensate for it later anyway. And I like this because in the books, this is the first time Naofumi has been without Raphtalia since the first book when he got her, after all that stuff with Mine happened. So Naofumi escapes from the prison and they see a white box monster. And this is all in the show. They go out farming a bunch of weak monsters and they run into multiple Kappas and get attacked and they're too weak to defeat them. And this is when Kazuna shows up and saves them. And I'm going to try to be pretty fast with the stuff that was accurate in the show because there's not really a reason to dilly-dally with it. So they do their intros and she says that she didn't get any experience from killing the Kappas. And Naofumi says it's because she's near him, who's a hero. And this is information that she doesn't know, because she never fought any of the waves. And we get a little bit of detail in here too that I like, where Naofumi remembers going through the portal and Kyo is talking to him and laughing that he fell into his trap. So you find out pretty much right away that he manipulated their portals. When Naofumi is talking to Kazuna, I'm terrible with the names, sorry. She gets excited when Naofumi mentions Glass, Lark, and Therese. And she gives her backstory where she was doing a virtual reality MMO game and it ended up being real. Kind of like the Sword Art Online thing for her. So she was summoned to fight a Dragon Emperor and not the waves. And she went on some adventures with Glass and their group, and their ship crashed into a hostile country and she got thrown in this jail that they're in now. She also explains that her weapon has a bunch of different modes because she's the hunting hero. They go around and farm experience for Rishia. And he sees all the weird animals in this world, and they eat and explore and kind of hang out. Kazuna takes them to see the barrier, and she tells Naofumi that monsters have fallen out of the labyrinth or left the labyrinth or whatever. And he remembers that he has the seeds for the crazy plant from his world, and he puts it near the barrier, and it fights a suit of armor that's also pretty big. And in the show, they just kind of had the plant take them to the surface, like very gently. But in the book, they fall through and just drop from the sky. Naofumi uses an airstrike shield to stop their fall for a second. Kazuna uses her fishing line to grab the roof and stop them before they hit the ground. So this episode is pretty accurate and only about a quarter of the book, which I think is a much better pace for the show. Unlike the first 2 books where they skipped like half, so they just really blew through everything. So the show follows the book pretty well here when they're deciding what to do, except for the fact that obviously Raphtalia isn't with them in the book. And the show she is. And this is where we get the explanations for the different races and Glass's power level. And there's a neat little thing here too in the book where they have a machine that functions like the drop items function from monsters in their world. And anyone can use them, not just the heroes. So they walk around and see the town. And this is where they figure out about gaining experience through different methods. Like the soul healing water that got skipped from book 6 comes up. And this is where Naofumi figures out that this is how Glass gets so powered up from it. And this is where he also gets the idea to sell the soul healing water to earn them some money. And I'm glad they included this in the show because they cut a lot of Naofumi's business stuff out, which is one of his strengths. And I love the part where Kazuna trips up Rishia to make the supply go down. And it was actually regular water, but it incites a bidding war in the crowd. So they go get some armor in this world, and it's more like Japanese-style clothing, and this is all in the show, as opposed to Naofumi's where it's a bit more European. And they also find Ofuda, which is a throwing weapon in this world, and the point of the money was to get them a travel voucher. Like, the reason that they wanted to sell the soul healing water was to get a travel voucher. They go farm and level up some more. They go scout out the building with the dragon hourglass to teleport out of the city, but security's tight. Kazuna talks about how she can attack with a curse series, but it comes at a heavy cost. And this is where the genius scientist guy is trying to improve the hourglass so that anyone can teleport, not just the heroes and vassal weapon carriers. So in the book, a government official recognizes Kazuna, and she takes off running at the hourglass. And this is pretty different from the show where, they leave and come back and there was a trap waiting for them. And because they had Raphtalia with them, she gets captured in the show. In the book, they launch a fireball at Naofumi, who reflects it back at them, and they pretty much just bully their way straight to the hourglass. And this is a bit more of a happy scene in the book as opposed to the show, because Kazuna, Rishia, and Naofumi teleport, and they go to Kazuna's country where they actually like her. And she explains that they can't follow because you have to have the dragon hourglass registered. So since no one's been to her country because it's hostile, they can't follow. And this is where episode 8 ends in the show, and this is like halfway through the book at this point. Episode 9 starts with them getting to this other country, and this is where the book continues also. And this is where they get a little bit pissy about Naofumi being a hero from another world. And Kazuna says that she needs to talk to Glass because she's mad about them trying to kill Naofumi. In the books, we get a little bit of world building here, where they go to Kazuna's house to spend the night, and they wait for Ethnobalt. And Naofumi is surprised that she's actually made herself a home here, because he hasn't really considered that in his world. So she has pictures of her friends and, her with her friends and that kind of thing. And Naofumi's a little bit jealous of this. They hang out, and she shows them how her weapon works for fishing. And then Ethnobalt shows up, and this is where we find out about the Shikagamis, and Naofumi gets his Raphtalia Shikigami. In the book, they're a little bit more customizable, where you can add a bunch of different ingredients together to make one. And also in the book, Naofumi calls it Raphchan right away, because it's based on Raphtalia. And it's like an ongoing joke in the book that Naofumi's really bad at naming people, or remembering their names, so he gives them like really dumb nicknames. So they use the Shikigami, and they get into Ethnobalt's boat, just like in the show. And this is where Naofumi overhears Philo crying, and they find her. And then this is all pretty much exactly what the show did, where they sneak into the place at night. She uses her hunting weapon to make them sneaky, which is a pretty cool little detail in the book. She like mutes their footsteps and stuff and makes them camouflage. And they break Philo out just like they do in the show. Naofumi says that he wants to catch the guy and destroy his soul who took Philo. And he's great. He's really good and like bordering on anti-hero in the book, which I love. And I'm really glad they included this part of the show. And it's kind of funny too, because Raphchan has illusion abilities since she's based off Raphtalia. And in the book, it's explained that she uses them to help torture this guy. And he also uses a shield that the counterattack is electricity to torture the guy. And he talks about the guy leaking liquid and vomiting, and he just keeps torturing him. And then the guy passes out, and Naofumi uses a night terror shield in the guy's dreams to keep torturing him. So he's pretty brutal. They cut it a little bit short in the show, which, it's fine. It's not a huge deal, but I still really like the side of him in the book. And this is pretty much where the episode ends. This is episode 9 of the show, and we're about 75% through the book here. And, from the book's perspective, Naofumi's gone almost an entire book without seeing Raphtalia. So it's been a couple weeks or a few days or however long it is exactly. I can't remember. But they go and farm and stuff in the book before any of this stuff happens to get their levels up. And there's a nice little thing in here where Philo is turning from a humming fairy into a falcon. And Rishia learns the language of this world by reading a book for a few days. So she's like super smart, and they really play that up in the book, which I like. So this is where episode 10 of the show starts, and this is the most different from the book, I would say. Because episode 10, we get Raphtalia's perspective, and the books only follow Naofumi. So in the book, right here, he sends Philo to go fly and look for Raphtalia, and they're using Philo and Raphchan combined to look for her, and Philo sees people getting chased. And in the book, they pretty much find Raphtalia instantly, like the next chapter after finding Philo. And they run into the guy from the show, but Naofumi never learns his name. The next chapter sums up Raphtalia's story in like 2 pages. And we got a whole episode for this in the show, which I didn't mind the episode, but it is a pretty big change. And this is where the other guy, the smart guy, throws a tantrum, and Naofumi just decides to call him trash number 2. because he didn't bother to learn his name when he met him. And we get a kind of funny scene in the book where Raphtalia meets Raphchan and is like pretty annoyed by it. The book differs a lot here from the show, because in the show, we watched Raphtalia, Lark, Therese, and Glass break out of jail together. We watched her get the katana, and then she kind of fights off that guy by herself. And then Naofumi shows up. In the book, that guy is in the middle of chasing them, and Naofumi's group shows up, and they have like a big team fight. In the book, we have Naofumi, Raphtalia, Rishia, Philo, Kazuna, Lark, Therese, and Glass versus Trash Number 2 and his harem and their white tigers. I'm a little bit bummed that we don't get scenes like these in the show, even though I get why they cut them out, because we get to see Naofumi do creative things like catch one of the tigers and throw it at the guy, and he uses his power up on Glass because they're a team now. Like all those little details that you get to see in the book, I really enjoy, that we're not going to get in the show, or at least not yet. And I'm not going to go into a ton of details about this fight, but I would definitely recommend reading the books in general. But the other guy, Trash Number 2, uses incantationless magic, and this ends up being like a mini boss fight, which is, a good way to end the book. And this is when Raphtalia does that powder snow move, is near the end of this fight, and it cuts the guy and deprives him of his magic. And then Kazuna uses this lure, and she tells Naofumi, don't touch anything that she touched with the lure. The lure, sorry, L-U-R-E, lure. This next scene is pretty sweet because she turns her weapon into a knife, and Raphtalia attacks Trash Number 2, and all of the tigers just fall apart into bloody chunks. And you get to see really how powerful Kazuna is. Raphtalia says don't move for at least 10 seconds, or you're going to split in half at the waist and die, because that's where Raphtalia cut him. And she's like, you're probably going to need healing magic for about a week. And he tries to get up anyway, and then his stomach spews out blood and he dies. Naofumi's response in the book is to laugh and say, the world is rid of another piece of garbage. And then he giggles to himself. So yeah, he's pretty ruthless in the books, which I love. Kazuna reveals that her lure attack that she did, the lure multiplies the damage of the next attack by a lot. So that's why she can just cut through enemies like that. But only animals, not humans. And we have an epilogue here that hasn't happened in the show yet, so this might be a minor spoiler. There's nothing huge here. But they go back to Kazuna's house, and she lectures Glass about them trying to destroy Naofumi's world. And Naofumi giggles at them getting lectured, because it's Lark, Therese, and Glass getting lectured by Kazuna. And now they have peace between their worlds because Kazuna's like, I'm not going to accept this. So she pretty much orders them to knock it off. Naofumi finds a new armor like the old guy in his world, but it's a woman named Romina. And they decide that they're going to have like a little celebratory party because they're all reunited, and then they're going to join up together to go get revenge on Kyo. And that's pretty much it for the book. I think they did a lot better job on this book because they didn't really rush it, and they took their time with 4 episodes, and they incorporated pretty much everything, even if they made some changes along the way. And I'm looking forward to the last arc. I'm a little bit worried again because pretty sure this season's only 13 episodes, so we're going to get this last book in 3 episodes. So I'm curious to see what they do with it, but I would recommend reading the books. The books are all really good, and you can read the entire first season. It's only 5 books. And that's what I was talking about with the pacing. If you consider the fact that the first season had 25 episodes and that 45-minute episode, each book was getting about 5 episodes, which is a pretty solid pace. Because these books, the way they're written, and the reason I would recommend them, is because they really fit a lot into them. There's not much, like some series, the author gets super descriptive and really drags things out, and it's slow moving. But Shield Hero doesn't feel like that. Pretty much every chapter, something is happening. So it's very easy read, and it's very fast read. And there's a lot going on. And you get a lot of the world building in the book that you might not notice in the show, too. Or I'll make one more video for book 9 in the last 3 episodes after the season ends, and we'll see what they do with it. Thanks. See ya.